to call on the gentleman from South Carolina for his 5 minutes of questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Price, are the Online Safety Act and the Digital Services Act extraterritorial in scope?
They, in effect, are, yes.
But they were not designed that way originally, right?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there's enough ambiguity that that was the intention, in my view. It's not precise.
At our last hearing, Mr. Farage, that you were here, Mr. Farage discussed the emergence of a two-tiered system of justice and how censorship efforts in the EU and the UK disproportionately target conservatives and individuals critical of their governments, particularly on issues like migration. Under the DSA, would a statement like, "We need to take our country back," be considered illegal hate speech?
It was given, in fact, that very phraseology as an example of something that would be in some of the documents that this committee has revealed.
Right, that was in the European Commission's May 2025 workshop, right?
Yes, correct.
In your opinion, do you think that there is a migrant crisis in Europe?
There is a very serious crisis in Europe with migration, and I agree entirely with Graham that it's fueling a lot of political division because our governments are not seen to take action on it, not take seriously. You saw in Spain recently, over 500,000 migrants, their status was changed, they were regularized or legalized, and then almost immediately afterwards, the Spanish Prime Minister is announcing that he intends to launch a major crackdown on what he describes as hate speech online. I don't think those things are unconnected. I think they're very much connected. And this is what we're seeing across the European Union as well, a desperate attempt to hold together the civic discourse by using censorship and threats. And that's precisely, and it's very interesting talking to Ranking Member Raskin about this, it's precisely the opposite of the tradition of this country historically. You have the debate out in open here, whereas in Europe, you silence, you suppress, and you arrest. Now, the problem with the DSA is, we've been describing, that takes the European approach to things and it globalizes it and it forces on it Americans.
Right, so I think that's kind of remarkable. So that if you live in Europe and you recognize this migrant crisis, you see the strain maybe on the social, the system itself, you see the money that's being spent, and you're kind of wondering, what about us that live here? And you were to speak out about that, that would be hateful speech, therefore illegal under the DSA, just by speaking out about it. Briefly, under the DSA, who determines what qualifies as hate speech or deceptive content? Who makes that determination?
That's made in practice by national regulators, by local law enforcement. So we all come down, unfortunately, to the lowest common denominator. And in effect, I don't mean to be attacking Germany all the time. It's Germany. The Germans and, I mean, the UK has its own system outside of the DSA. But the level of crackdown on speech in Germany is unprecedented. 60 Minutes did a very good documentary highlighting that issue. And because of the German obsession with controlling speech, that has been now expanded across the European Union and is now being globalized, unfortunately, through the DSA, we're seeing everything set to that standard.
So in effect, this is a subjective determination by some faceless, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrat that is making the determination on what hate speech is or deceptive content is or is not. Do you trust EU bureaucrats to define hate speech when they label, "We need to take our country back" as such?
No, I don't. And as I say, most of the raft of digital regulation that we've seen came in on foot of the so-called rise of the right, the Brexit vote. And that's very tightly connected. It's caused by that. It's correlated with it. And the reason being that they felt they had lost narrative control. And Graham's correct. The legacy media in Europe is heavily funded by the state in many accounts. Whereas with X, people can post their opinions. They can get millions of views for them.
Right, it's a free exchange of ideas, right?
Free exchange of ideas.
Modern public square. Under the DSA, companies are required to monitor and censor such language, and violations obviously would result in fines or maybe even FBI raids or federal raids in Paris on X, right? That's the next
yes, sir, that's what
punitive step.
Yeah, and lawyers are often careful about making predictions, but I confidently predict that the next round of fines on X will be connected with illegal content and this content moderation for systemic risk. They identify so-called anti-migration narratives or others as a systemic risk to the discourse inside the European Union, and they have to stop it. And it's not just Europeans, and this is where this becomes global. if you're in Texas or South Carolina or New York and you're commenting on what's going on in Europe, saying, you know, the migration situation is a disaster, they don't want that speech to leak across into Europe. So either X will start to globally moderate it by removing it, or we're going to see a firewall being set up in the center of the Atlantic, and that would be a disaster even further for free speech. It creates exactly what Vice President Vance described as this civilizational divide.
Well, it's alarming to me. I just visited the DMZ a couple months ago, and the divide between the West and South Korea, if you will, and then North Korea. This seems like, and the suppression, the lengths that the North Koreans go to make sure that things don't come into the country, this sounds exactly like where Europe is headed, and hopefully they can course correct and that we never follow them on this path. Thank you, Madam Chair. With that, I yield. Mr. Chair.